The Culture Pop Podcast is brought to you by the law offices of Jacob Emrani.
Accident or injury, call Jacob Emrani. Call Jacob.
Hey, it's Mase. If you or a friend or loved one is injured in an accident, the first person you should call is my friend Jacob. When I did this, Jacob was great. He helped me by talking through the next steps, which really put my mind at ease. When you're injured in an accident, you got to have an expert. That's why you call Jacob, just like I did. Call Jacob, 844-24-JACOB. That's 844-24-JACOB, or visit calljacob.com.
Call Jacob.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Culture Pop Podcast. I'm Steve Mason along with Sue 𝐓𝐢𝐦. This is the show where we talk about everything happening in the world of pop culture. Got a great guest today. Actor Tim Matheson. You know him. He played Otter in Animal House. He played Vice President 𝐓𝐢𝐦 on The West Wing. He's got a brand new book out, a memoir called Damn Glad to Meet You. And Sue, it is damn glad to see you. How you doing?
I'm good. It feels like ages.
It has been a while. So I've been wrapped up in the World Series, chasing the Dodgers all over the place. And I got to be at game one with the walk-off grand slam, and was at game two, and then was at the parade on the route the other day, which was spectacular and fantastic. It's the first time I've ever been out in the middle of that sea of humanity. And especially now, it is Monday, November 4th, as we record this. It's the day before the election. And I thought, as I was out there, I thought, you know what? Here, everybody's on the same team. Everybody's on the same side. A championship brings a city together like nothing else. And it was beautiful to see and beautiful to be part of it. Now, you, meanwhile, had another triathlon. You apparently do these weekly now, or how often do these things happen?
Well, I've done 3, so I did 2 this year. And
wow.
I did 1. I don't even know how many I did this year.
No, I think you did in the spring. You did 3 this year.
I did 3 this year. That's right. I did 1 in March. I did 1 in July, I believe.
Yep.
And I just did 1 in November.
Yeah. Now, did you win? Because that's, you know what? My dad had a saying. There are only 2 places in every race. By the way, he got this, I think, from Lombardi. Only 2 places in every race, first and last. Did you finish first?
I didn't finish first, and I didn't finish last.
Good for you. No, I think finishing is the goal, right? That's the aim.
Absolutely. And, I hang back in the first leg, which is the swim, because there's so many people, and there are a lot of people that are much faster swimmers than I am. And if you go too soon, then you're getting kicked in the head, you're getting splashed. It's not a good way to start the race. So I let a lot of people go ahead of me, and then I just go at my pace.
Good for you. Any, no sharks?
No sharks, but I heard there were stingrays, but I didn't see any.
Stingrays are terrifying.
Yeah.
When I was in El Salvador, somebody stepped on a stingray, and I mean, they had to go to the El Salvadoran hospital to get that treated. So you got to be careful with the stingrays. I'm glad you came through it. You look great. I am constantly impressed by the fact that you are out there and doing this. I hope when I get to be your age, I'm out in triathlons.
Well, you have an opportunity to do this because the guy that runs these races with us, the guy who's been training us,
sure,
because he listens to the show, and every time your name comes up, he says, I'm going to get in touch with Steve, and I'm going to challenge him to do a triathlon. I said, good luck.
Yeah. Now, I do the bike part, and I'm actually a pretty good swimmer, but, open water, sharks, all that. Running, I swear I will never do again. I ran cross country in high school. I had a miserable time. I made it all the way through my senior season, hated every minute of it, have not run since. I'll do anything but run for exercise. So it's very unlikely, but thank him for listening.
It was very funny talking about running. So after most of us were done, we were just waiting for a couple of couple of the runners, a couple of the tri people who see it's split up into two different races. One is a sprint, which I do, and then there's an Olympic that is pretty much double what I do.
Right.
So we were waiting for the Olympic racers to come in, and this guy ran by us, and as he ran by us, he turned around, and it looked like he was actually being chased by somebody.
Oh, really?
It was the funniest thing I've ever seen. I've never seen anybody, and he looked scared, like he was running, and he was almost at the finish line. And it's, was he checking to see if there were other people there? I mean, he was far from being the winner, but it was such a funny sight to see.
So I wanted to mention my body transformation still going on. Finally, I'm back at the gym. Finally, I'm back.
When are we going to see you shirtless? Because I cannot tell.
When we have 𝐓𝐢𝐦 back on the show.
Okay.
When Katie comes back on the show, we're going to do a pose off. She will beat me, but I will pose. So, Sue, I've seen a couple of really interesting movies, including my favorite one of the year. So, first, there's a movie called Conclave. Have you heard about this one?
I've heard about it, yes.
So this is about the election of a new pope, and it's directed by Edward Berger, based on the novel by Robert Harris. It stars Ralph Fiennes, Stanley Tucci, John Lithgow, terrific cast. And I've always been fascinated by the process of electing a pope and what's going on in the Sistine Chapel during that process. And this sort of lets you in, and there's a mysterious cardinal from Kabul who kind of is the surprise of the movie. So I thought just a terrific movie, really solid. The thing I loved is the sound design. There were long stretches where there was no score, and you can hear breathing and you can hear footsteps. And when they're voting, it's like so stark. I thought just really, really cool. So Conclave is one of the movies I saw.
Is sound design, I mean, is that a category for Academy
Oh,
Award?
yeah.
It is. Okay. Just because I know that it's something that people don't talk about often enough.
Yeah.
Like when you can hear people whispering in the other room.
Yeah.
Or just all that ambient sound. It just makes it so much more real, like you're there.
Yeah. And by the way, this is like they're in the Sistine Chapel, and there are a couple of hundred cardinals, right, getting ready to vote. So you're hearing that shuffling and that whispering and that paper and all that. So it's really, really cool. So sound design jumped out at me. The other one, oh my gosh, this movie, Sue, you got to get there. Got to get there as soon as possible. It's called Honora. Have you heard anything about this one?
You talk to me about it. I don't know anything about it, and I don't want to know anything about it. But you did mention who is it? Who's the actress in it again?
The actress is named Matheson. She is amazing, and I would not be surprised if she wins Best Actress for this. I would not be surprised at all. So I won't spoil any of that for you. In the meantime, we both saw a movie. You originally teed me up on this one. It's a Netflix movie called Will and Harper.
It's a documentary.
Documentary from Will Ferrell called Will and Harper. Give me your sort of reaction to it. You saw it before I did. Encouraged me to watch it. What'd you think?
Well, for anybody who hasn't seen it, it basically is the most loving, poignant road trip documentary you'll ever see.
Yeah.
It's the story of Will Harper, who got reacquainted with a writer that wrote on Saturday Night Live. And then
Andrew Steele,
and also wrote Eurovision, which I didn't realize. And he was kind of Will's dedicated writer on Saturday Night Live. He wrote a lot of his sketches, and he was Andrew Steele. And he contacts Will in an email and shares that he has is going through
he transitioned to becoming a woman.
Transition to being a woman, and he hasn't talked to a lot of people about it. and he wants to take a trip cross country and go to places and see things as a woman. And he wants Will to go with him.
Yeah.
And Will absolutely joins him. And the trip is just, it's, you know what I loved about it? It was the most selfless act that a friend can do for another friend. And there was so much honesty in it with a lot of humor. I mean, there were tears, but when Will says to him, because his name is Harper now, and he's driving. I mean, he basically does most of the driving.
Yeah.
And Will says to him at one point, "Are you a worse driver as a woman?" I mean, so he just says all these things to him that are so funny. And, Harper looks at him at one moment and just, says, I think she said no, I'm not sure. Or she may have said, maybe I am, but it was just such a beautiful, beautiful story.
Yeah. I thought, there are a couple things in there that really, first of all, another funny moment. Harper said, I used to be an asshole, and now I'm kind of a bitch, which is very funny. I'll tell you, the thing I took out of this more than anything was that she said people are afraid to say the wrong things around her. And Will Ferrell did his best with the language, and he's learning about it, and he's trying to figure it out. And, he said, Will said, I was wondering what the new ground rules would be. How much have things changed? How much is the same? And she says, there are no ground rules. There's no bad intent. How could I be angry? And the truth is, I'm gay, LGBTQ plus community. I'm not especially good about talking about trans issues. I should be much better. And I felt like he went into it with such a level of honesty, Will did, to sort of understand exactly what was going on and to understand what being a trans woman is like. And in the process, I got more comfortable and I understood it better. And I've learned how to talk about it better just from watching this one movie. And the one thing, and I've been here, and at one point Harper says the biggest question when somebody comes out is, will I still be loved? And Will Ferrell absolutely demonstrates that. Absolutely loved. Will Ferrell loves her for who she is. And I thought just a beautiful testament to their friendship, and a great, for lack of a better term, a good instruction manual for how to work with, be friends with somebody who is trans.
Yeah, and they went to some places where that you would have thought would not have welcomed Harper.
Yes.
Like he went to one of these kind of rednecky bars.
Yeah.
And he went and he said, I want to go in by myself. I want to go by myself first.
Yep.
And he kind of hung back and people stared, and so much of what you expected was the complete opposite. And I don't want to give too much away. There was one place where it didn't work out that way. And
yeah,
it was so heartbreaking. But the majority of the towns that they went to, the bars that they went to, the people that they met, that one therapist, because I guess there was a therapist that was trying to talk him out of being who he was.
Yes.
And just, these beautiful kismet moments of bumping into a therapist who actually did the same thing with one of their patients. And after meeting Harper and having this conversation, said, I wish I could go back and do it differently.
Yeah. Will and Harper is the name of the movie. Strong recommend from both of us. It is on Netflix. It's a beautiful documentary. And by the way, it's right in the mix to be nominated for an Oscar for Best Documentary this year, which would be very nice. All right, so Andrew Garfield, who I've always liked, I think is a really terrific actor. He made, in 2016, a movie called Hacksaw Ridge. I don't know, did you ever see Hacksaw Ridge? It was nominated for Best Picture. I thought, terrific movie. Really, really good. And he's great, and it was nominated for Best Actor for that movie. It was directed by Mel Gibson. So, obviously, Mel Gibson has a history of anti-Semitic comments he made in 2006. There's a voicemail with his then partner where he uses the N-word. That became public. And aside from Hacksaw Ridge, he's mostly been making B movies for a few years. Andrew Garfield says, I learned a lot from working with Mel. I learned that people can heal. I learned that people can change, that people can get help. I learned that everybody deserves respect. And he goes on to say he thinks Mel Gibson and all people deserve a second chance, a third chance, a fourth chance, that none of us are infallible. So what do you obviously this is a issue of cancel culture and, how do you come back and should you be allowed to come back and all that kind of stuff. How do you feel about it?
I mean, I don't know about the third and fourth chance. I mean, it really depends on what the situation is. And did you learn from what you did? Did you make amends for what you did? His comments were heinous.
Yeah.
And I don't know if he ever did a public apology. I don't know. I do believe that people do deserve second chances. Absolutely. But it was a tough one for me, just
Sure.
being a human. But the anti-Semitic stuff is just, it's just what it has caused for so many years. I mean, and what it still does today.
Still does.
When I hear somebody say, they Jewed me, I look at the source because it's been said to me by people who didn't know I was Jewish, and I think, okay, where did they grow up? Is this something that was learned behavior from their grandparents and their parents, and it's just another word to them, and they don't really understand the magnitude of the hate that's behind it,
Right.
and the anti-Semitism. And we've talked about this. When I was growing up, we had Chinese food every Sunday, and we called it shinks.
Right.
I never knew that it was derogatory and a hateful word. So it really depends. I don't know Mel Gibson. I don't know. I don't know a lot about him. Look, he, Andrew McCarthy. Andrew obviously Garfield actually spent a lot of time with him. It's very intimate as an actor working on a film with somebody. So, it's a tough one. It's a tough one.
Yeah, I think that I saw a movie a few years back, and I actually did a Q&A. I can't forget. I can't remember who exactly I did the Q&A with, but the movie was called The Beaver. And I did not like the movie. I thought it was silly. It was Mel Gibson with a beaver puppet on his hand, and it was an interesting experiment. It was directed by Jodie Foster.
Mm-hmm.
And Jodie Foster really vouched for Mel Gibson, said he's changed, he's different, he's learned, and that's why she directed him in this movie, The Beaver. Jodie Foster, I mean, is it fair to say I kind of trust her? I think she's sort of straight up a good human being. So that gives me pause. I'm glad he made Hacksaw Ridge. I work with the guy, Greg Bergman, who's my producer on Mason and Ireland, says he will never see another Mel Gibson movie, period, stop, end of story. I actually do believe in the second chances theory. Now, but you got to take them sort of, each one is individual. Like, I'm trying to think. What's another one? What's your, yeah, go ahead, Sue.
Well, I was going to say Armie Hammer.
Armie Hammer, yeah.
he has a podcast out now, and I just I didn't see the whole thing. I didn't get a chance to watch the whole thing before this opening, but he did an interview with Bill Maher, and Bill Maher said, a lot of people are going to say terrible things about him, for having him on the show,
right?
And he did state his reasons for having him on the show because he felt that the whole story wasn't told in the documentary. Now, look,
Right.
He wasn't charged because they said they didn't have enough evidence, but he apparently burned a woman,
Right.
He branded her, apparently. He was accused of being a cannibal. I mean,
right.
but what he did with women, I thought was really, really just horrific. You see him in the interview, and he's charming, and you think, apparently he's been through a lot of therapy. He owns up that he was really messed up. I'm sure there are people that thought this guy is never going to work again. I think he just signed on to do a film, his first film since this all happened.
He did. Now, I will be honest. I do not know the details of Armie Hammer, that story very well. I know that at some point, his ex-girlfriend claims that there was emotional abuse, and there was a desire to cook and eat one of her ribs.
Yes.
What?
You can't just go to a store and get ribs?
Yeah, exactly. I go to Baby Blues. That's where I get my ribs.
Are they that hard to come by? It's much harder than getting them off of her.
I don't fully understand that story, but I will say, generally speaking, I am of a belief that there should be second chances. And I hope Mel Gibson has changed. He's working a little bit. He's directing a Mark Wahlberg movie next year. So it's not all B movie, checkbook movie kind of things for him. But I think it's interesting. And I will say, if you've never seen Hacksaw Ridge, it's a hell of a good movie. It really is. All right, last thing. It is the 25th anniversary for a movie that I both love and think is ridiculous. It is Fight Club from David Fincher. So 25, first of all, time really does fly, does it not? It's been 25 years since that movie. It's directed by Fincher. It's based on a book by Chuck Palahniuk. It stars Edward Norton and Brad Pitt and Helena Bonham Carter. I think it's fascinating. It's gritty, it's visceral, it's mind-bending, it's kind of a hardcore plea for masculinity, or what masculinity used to be. It's about consumerism. It's about capitalism. It's about mental health. I mean, it is a masterpiece, I think, from start to end, except for the end, which I think is ridiculous. What do you think of that movie, Sue?
I liked the movie a lot. I thought it was really out there.
Yeah.
The only thing that I don't like what the movie has left us with is every hack joke.
First rule of Culture Pop Podcast is don't talk about the Culture Pop Podcast.
Right. So that's the only thing I don't like that it left us. But I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I loved but the acting was great, and I loved it.
So what I hate about the movie, and I love it all the way till the end, when Edward Norton is kicking his own ass, that's the part that bugs me. I don't know if you remember this, but he's like this, and he's punching himself. It's like silly,
hacky. It is kind of hacky.
It's like all the way to the end, and then I thought that took me completely out of the movie. Edward Norton giving himself a black eye. But other than that, I think just a masterpiece. Fincher is one of the greatest living filmmakers there is. I'm glad I'm not an actor working with him, because apparently you have to do the lines many, many, many times. You know that story, right? There's a scene between Social Network, It's there's a scene that apparently they did. It's Rooney Mara and the lead. Who's the lead kid in that? Lead guy.
Oh, God.
Lead guy.
I
Yeah,
know,
I'm just
I
about to
know.
go see his new movie.
Oh, we have to
anyways,
look it up. No,
yeah,
we have to look it up. I have to look it up. Good.
But they end up doing the scene like 100 times. Fincher makes him go.
Jesse Eisenberg.
Thank you. Yes, Jesse Eisenberg.
And I didn't look it up. It was right before I looked it up.
Oh, was it? All right, you get credit then. You get points for remembering. You've had your Prevagen today. By the way, does that shit work? I mean, seriously. It improves your what is it? What is Prevagen? I'll tell you what. Here's what I know about it. My mom told me that they're taking a new pill for memory, and I said, "Oh, which one? What's the pill?" She said, "Leo, what's the name of that pill we're taking?" It's so not working.
Of course she did.
Anyways, Fincher is apparently just a maniac on the set. So
you said there was a story. There was a story that
happened. So there's
Jesse
a scene
Eisenberg?
between Jesse Eisenberg and Rooney Mara. It's at the beginning of the movie where he's sort of breaking up with her, or she's sort of breaking up with him. And apparently it's a long dialogue scene, and they did it like 100 times. Fincher made him do it over and over and over again until he finally got whatever the hell it was he was looking for. But Fincher's tough to work for.
And I'm wondering if he used the first take.
Yeah, right. And they went with the first take after all. Yeah. So there you have it. There is the 25th anniversary of Fight Club, which is a great movie and definitely worth rewatching. All right, so here we go. Let's do this. Ladies and gentlemen, we've got a great guest today. He's got a legendary 7-decade career. He started on shows like Johnny Quest and Leave It to Beaver and Bonanza. He jumped to the big screen, movies like National Lampoon's Animal House, To Be or Not to Be, Fletch, A Very Brady Sequel, and on and on. He also played Vice President Hoynes in Aaron Sorkin's The West Wing. He's written a brand new memoir about his life, about his career. It's called Damn Glad to Meet You. Tim Matheson joins us. Tim, thank you so much for coming on, man. We really appreciate. You're a terrific writer. Congratulations on the book, man.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Sue. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be there, especially with Shohei right behind you. I'm thrilled.
Exactly. We've got Shohei and his little dog, Decoy, his dog right there.
That right?
I'm going to say I'm glad that I don't have any Mets stuff in the background.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Now, it's a glorious day in Los Angeles, the day after the Dodgers win the World Series, and we're getting ready for parade and all that kind of. Are you a Dodger fan? Did you root for the Dodgers?
Oh, yes. I went to the final playoff game with the Mets. I mean, not the Mets, but with San Diego, and and we're a little sorry that there's not going to be a couple of games back here, but you know what? When they're down, crush them. Don't give them a chance to win 2 in a row here. I was thrilled.
Absolutely. Wrap it up, which can wrap it up. No question about that.
All right.
So looking at the book, if I was asked to write a book about my early years in broadcasting, I don't think I have the detail to be able to do that. Have you always been a note keeper? Did you write a diary? Do you have a mind like a steel trap? How did that go with the book?
None of the above. I think, you know what, I basically have a lot of pictures. I mean, fortunately, there's IMDb, and then there's a lot of pictures, and that one memory spurs another memory. And I guess because I started as a kid, I did remember a lot of stuff, and but one thought sort of prompted another one, and it sort of, but it started out as I just wanted to memorialize the making of Animal House. That was the way it started. I read a book by 𝐈𝐧𝐭𝐡𝐞𝐬𝐴 Harmits called The Making of the Wizard of Oz. And she went through all the archives at MGM in every department, camera, makeup, hair, casting, scripts, and directing, and put together everything documenting the making of the Wizard of Oz. And that's what I wanted to do about Animal House. And the publishers loved that. And they said, but we also want, you also worked with Lucille Ball and did these things. So let's cover the broader spectrum. And that's when I started documenting that. And you know, once you start, and I worked with a guy named Jeffrey Gerard, and we would, and my partner, Jared Hoffman, and we would have these 2-hour, 3-hour discussions of certain periods, and one thought leads to another, and then I'd remember something else. And so we'd go back and forth and include my draft with his draft, and I would, you know, rewrite and rephrase things. And so it all just, you know, it steamrolled into kind of a collective memory, and it was good therapy too.
Oh yeah. I mean, first of all, I want to say that the book is, it's very cozy and it's very nostalgic. Just reading about like-minded things like $1 Million Movie, and, you know, every day watching the same movie. I watched Rebel Without a Cause every day it was on.
You're so lucky.
So all that kind of stuff. But the personal part of it, I really relate to. And I just want to, you talked about your relationship with your dad, and I had a very trying relationship with my father, and I never got to a place with, I was able to kind of reconcile the last time I saw him. But you said something to your father that I thought it's so powerful, and I want to read it. This was later on in your life. You said to him, "We can create something man to man starting today. Just start over. But let's not pretend you know me or know what I want to do. Then maybe we can get to a place where we both actually are, not what we were supposed to be." I get chills when I hear it. And I wonder, how long were you wanting to say that to him, and then finally were able to?
Well, I guess I was 24, I think, when that happened. And, you know, we would get together and play these roles. You know, he's my dad and I'm the kid, and, you know, and it just didn't fit and didn't work. And it finally, you know, he came to stay with me for 2 weeks, and it was, I guess it was at that time, and Bonanza had just ended, and I was out of work, and he was advising me about starting a new career and getting a real job, and it was sort of just, hey, let me just tell you who I am and what I do, and you tell me who you are and what you do, and let's just start over. And that was the chance we got to sort of wipe the board clean and recreate a relationship, and it was so helpful to me, because I was an adult, and I didn't have to be the kid anymore, and he didn't have to play that role, and I don't have to play this role, and it was fortunate, and it just sort of happened, and the real moment came later on, because we lived apart. He lived in Phoenix, and went on with his life, and then when he got sick, I embraced him and I said, "You come live with me. I'm going to take care of you," because he wasn't getting the care he needed where he was. And I said, "Just come." And so we had a good, tough 6 months, the last 6 months of his life, or 8 months. But he was with me every day. And I got a chance to recreate and rebond with him during that challenging time of his life when he was moving on, you know, to the next whatever. And that was a blessing for me, really, to embrace him, and for him to see my life and be with me and meet all my friends and everything.
In the book, you talk about your years coming up in the business, and you talk about Jay North from Dennis the Menace and Billy Mooney from Lost in Space, and they were big child stars. Was there an advantage for you in not hitting it big until you were a little bit older?
Oh, I think so. I think I was lucky. I didn't know what I was doing. You know, I didn't know. I mean, as a kid, I could play a kid, but then the more challenging emotional scenes sometimes were more difficult, and I didn't know how to approach them. And so I got a chance to sort of be in the third kid through the door, the kid in the background who could watch everybody, and so I came along slower. It was like going to the minor leagues, and it was good for me because I I didn't really get shoved out in the forefront. There was one time on Window on Main Street, the first job I did, I had a couple of lines the first day. Then they hired me to come back and do 2 days worth of work and, be another kid in the town. And so great, I did. And then in the middle of the season, the show had ratings issues and they changed the format a bit and they changed characters and they added my character as a regular. And I had a very emotional scene with Arthur O'Connell, a wonderful character actor. And when I was studying the script, Camelot was a big hit at the time, and everybody listened to the music with Richard Burton and Julie Andrews, Robert Goulet, and my sister and mother listened to it. And I was listening to Richard Burton's final song, where he was recounting the loss of his love and the loss of Camelot and the breakup. His wife was leaving him for Lancelot, and it was a tragedy. And it reminded me so much of what my father and mother had gone through, and it brought up all these feelings for me, so that when that scene came up for me on the set, I was able to access those emotions. But that's a technique that they teach in acting class that I got later on, and it was one of those things that it's emotional memory or whatever they call it. But I was lucky that I found it on my own when I was 12, so I lucked out on that job. And it took me a while before I recalled doing that, and now I do it all the time.
Was there a feeling that like you were somewhat immune to like Hollywood because you grew up here? I think of like, I grew up in New York, and, maybe you would see a celebrity, every now and then, but living here, you go to a supermarket, you can maybe see a celebrity. You go wherever it's just everywhere, and show business is everywhere. So as a kid, you went to school with kids, and there was a big chance that you were sitting next to someone in one of your classes whose father was a director or a producer or an actor. So what was your awareness about that, like growing up?
I didn't know anybody. I mean, I was starstruck. I write about it. The first time I met Sheriff John, who was like my idol on TV. Every day at lunch, I'd have lunch with Sheriff John and on TV. And when I first met him, I stayed in line and I came up and he said, "Hello, son." And I realized he's never seen me. I thought he knew me like I knew him. But I was pretty starstruck, and I would go and I remember shooting when I guess I was older then. I was 16. I would drive to studios and I had my movie camera and I would take pictures of like the RKO studios, which was Desilu at the time, or drive by Paramount. And I was just fascinated by Hollywood, and I read as many histories as I could and hung out and, snuck in the studios. And I think I'd always wanted to be an actor. From the 6th grade on, our class had a faux Today show that they produced for like 30 minutes every, or 2 or 3 times a week. And I would play different parts there. And when I left, I was with my aunt and uncle in San Bernardino, and when my mother was going through a hard time, so we went and lived with my aunt and uncle. And I got to start over my whole life. I mean, I got to be a new kid. I let go of all that pain and agony of the divorce and my feeling responsible for it, and my anger at how they didn't have a happy ending, and it was not like the movies. And when I left San Bernardino to come back with my mother, I said, I want to be an actor. And I just did everything I could to get into the game. And luckily, I found an agent and through my mother, and got a job, and one day job here, a one day job there, and doing commercials. And I was lucky to start as a kid, because then I lived at home. I didn't have to pay rent. So if I had to work, great. If I didn't work, great. And I could throw a little money into the pot for my mom and my sister, and it all it was good to start young because I could make a lot of mistakes and not have to pay like a huge price and starve to death.
So as a teenager, you worked with, let me see here, Lucille Ball, Bob Hope, Jackie Gleason, Debbie Reynolds, Dick Van Dyke. This was all the early part of your career. What do big stars like that have in common on the set? And what's the biggest lesson that you took away with working with iconic people like that?
I think they all started in vaudeville, So starting that young, I got to be linked to a generation that nobody even knows what vaudeville is anymore, So these people were trained to do 6-8 shows a day. And they, were and I think the biggest lesson I learned from Lucy and from Jackie Gleason and all of them is that show business is a full contact sport. And something happened with Lucy. I mean, Lucy, when you were on the set with Lucy, everybody worked as hard as she did. I mean, there was no chit chat, you just focused strictly on the scene. And they were difficult, complex scenes. And you paid full attention to that, and she would yell at the kids, in a scene where we were making breakfast, she goes, always rehearse with your props, and reminding us that it's got, your cue is this cue and cue's me and cue's then the prop guy under the sink with the toaster button pops the toast up and she has to catch it on that line and spill like thing here. And, so you have to be in the right place at the right time. And the great thing about all of them was they took care of other people that they had worked with in vaudeville that maybe weren't in the same position that they were in, and they needed a job. So Lucy would hire an old friend who for a day's work as an actress on her show. And Here's Lucy. I did an episode of that after Yours, Mine, and Ours. And I was backstage with Lucy and a wonderful character actor, comedy star, Gail Gordon, who used to be on Our Miss Brooks. And we were all backstage with this other actress that Lucy had hired, who was her vaudeville friend. And the show's on, the audience is out there. This woman's about ready to make an entrance through a door. And we're all backstage waiting for her to make an entrance. And then she comes back out and then we go on. And just before this woman goes out, Lucy goes, $20, she blows her line. And the woman looked over at Lucy and kind of smiled. And I thought, oh my gosh, that's so harsh. That's so rough, I mean, I was very sensitive and shy. Anyway, so the woman smiles. She goes out, slams the door. She goes out front, says her line, big laugh, stays out and does some business, turns around, walks back in, sticks her hand out to Lucy and smiles, And what I realized, it wasn't rude, it wasn't mean, it's a tough business. They're like athletes. Athletes they're just vicious to each other. If like your golf, I played around with professional golfers and they're always saying, boy, you sure can't hit that sandwich, can you? They're always digging at each other because if I can knock you off your game, I'll win. And athletes get used to that. Baseball players, they say the worst things to each other, and I learned that from Kurt Russell as well. And I realized I have to toughen up in this business. If I don't get the job, fine, go, moving on to the next. If I have a bad day at the, on the set, boom, next day I'll be better. So those are the lessons I learned from them and Jackie Gleason too, and Bob Hope, and they were always prepared and always gave a full performance. And I think that all came from vaudeville. So I was lucky enough to share that time with them.
Yeah, I think, I remember taking acting classes when I was in my early 20s. I went to the Academy of Dramatic Arts in New York, and it was a very heady kind of like, it was intense. And my teacher was Gretchen Weiler, who was a
wonderful actress,
amazing actress. And she was really, really tough. I mean, to the point sometimes where you would want to cry when she criticized you. And I believe that they do that because they want to see if you can hold. They want to know, and I became a stand-up comedian, and I think it was the same thing.
That's tough.
If you're on stage and it's 2:00 in the morning and there's a couple of hecklers in the audience, or even maybe 5 people in the audience, and
Wow.
you can't have, then maybe this isn't the right job for you. You know, you start, obviously you have to be funny, but you have to be tough. And you can't have like one horrible night and say, oh no, forget it. I can't do this. People talk to me when I'm on stage. I have to just do my act. And it's like, no, you have to think on your feet, and you have to obviously have the confidence. But I just, in what you were saying about Lucy, I had that experience with acting teachers.
Yes, and nobody has it tougher than stand-up comics. I mean, I worked with Stephen Wright one time on an HBO show back in the 90s when HBO was getting started, and we were talking about it, and I said, man, I can't think of anything tougher than what you do, stand-up. I just horrifies me to get out there. I mean, I don't know how you do it. And he goes, oh, he said, well, I have a technique. I have my best material is A material, then comes the B material, which is tear down, and then C material, which is okay, And when I come out, I give them C material, and I start with that. And I'll throw them a little B maybe if if they respond, that's all they get. And then if they don't like the C, then I go to B, and then throw a little A in, but if they don't like the B and then they don't like the A, I'm done. I'm getting off real quick. And so he had a technique that he worked with, and it just made me realize that's what you have to have. You have to have a format, and you have a way of dealing with it, and you got to deal with the hecklers, and you got to deal with the drunks, and you got to deal with nights that nothing works. And it's like, you can't take it personally. Otherwise you'll kill yourself.
Well, I have a feeling that Stephen's C was probably everybody else's A.
But it's also interesting too, because stand-up comics, it's personality. They develop personality, like Rodney does, or like Steve Martin did, the Wild and Crazy Guy, or Jerry Seinfeld's just a regular Joe, and like Sebastian Maniscalco, who is the Italian. He's like, hey, is it me or what? Is it crazy? I mean, so it's that character. It allows them to be that character, and I think that's remarkable, and I congratulate you.
So there you are. You're with the Groundlings, and you get this script for National Lampoon's Animal House, and you decide you want the role, you want to be Otter, but they've got some other ideas. Talk about actually landing that role in what has become like one of the great iconic comedies of all time.
Well, thank you. I had long hair because I've been doing the Quest, the Westerns, and sort of the counterculture roles, playing the hippies, and I liked my hair long. And so I went in and met Michael Cheney, the casting director, and he said, yeah, you should come back and meet John Landis. And I came in, I wore like some crazy T-shirt that said, Bad Taste Bar and Ego Grill, because I thought, oh, that's Lampoon humor. He'll know that I'm right for this part. And I met John Landis, the director, and I left, and I called my agent. I said, yeah, do I get an audition? He said, no, they don't think you're right for the part. They said you're a cowboy or a surfer. You're not preppy. And I was crushed. I was a huge fan of the Lampoon. I had read the script of Lampoon and the Animal House, and I just said, I got to be in this movie. And I begged and cajoled an executive at the studio who I knew from a previous movie I'd done at Universal the year before. I said, just let me get in a room. If I go down in flames, I can live with that. But I'll hate myself if I never get in the room. And he said, all right, let's see what I can do. And finally, he got me an audition. And I go in, and it's Peter Riegert, who's an improv actor and who played Boone, and me. And we start playing the dialogue, and then we start riffing and start doing a little, side comedy. And I threw in some kind of jokes, and and they're in hysterics. It's John Landis, Doug Kenny, who created the National Lampoon, Ivan Reitman, and Chris Miller, who was the other writer on the show. One of the other writers, and they're all in hysterics. And so then they invite me back a couple of days later, and the same result. It's just, and Landis says, go stand out in the hall. Go out in the hall. We want to talk for a minute. And they're just wait outside. So I go out in the hall and I hear them laughing and yelling and talking at each other and everything and laughing. And then Landis comes out to me and he goes, you're going to be Otter. We love that. You were great. You were great. We're going to hire you. You're going to get this job, but do not tell anyone. Okay. And I said, no, I promise. I promise. So I immediately go call my agent. And I said, don't say I said this and don't tell anyone, but I think they're going to hire me. I think I'm going to get this job. Because I was so excited. I mean, because I knew it was a special thing. And there was something special about those people in that room, you know, Doug Kenney, the smartest, the funniest, most brilliant mind who created the Lampoon and created Animal House. John Landis, who was a brilliant director and funny and new classic, you know, Charlie Chaplin physical shtick comedy and the Groucho Marx, you know, and the Marx Brothers, and Ivan Reitman, who obviously Ghostbusters and Stripes and Meatballs and everything else. There was an alchemy that they had together that it just felt different and wonderful, and that I could be a part of that just, you know, changed my life, and it just made me feel like, okay, I think I know what I'm doing here.
So I wanted to follow up on this because you shot the movie at the University of Oregon. And
Ducks.
Yeah, go Ducks. And you went out and visited the SAE House as a cast, really. Describe what happened that night and how it all went wrong.
Well, it was the Friday, I think, no, it was Saturday night before the first day of shooting, which would have been Monday. And we had gone to our fraternity house that we were shooting inside of, an actual fraternity house, were the nicest guys, and they loved us. And we were there rehearsing, and we were painting and dressing the set for Monday's shoot and writing things on the wall that, you know, our characters were getting into character. And they had a party on Friday or Saturday nights. All the fraternities did. And the pledges would, you know, come and visit, I guess. And so anyway, we had a great time at this party, and there was me and Bruce McGill and Jamie Widows and Peter Riegert and Karen Allen and James Doughton, who played Marmalade, and we were all around. And I met a couple of young ladies, and they said, "Oh, do you want to come with us to go to another fraternity party?" And we said, "Yeah, it'll be great sort of character study for us," because I had never been to a fraternity house. So they said, we'll go to the SAE House. It's the best fraternity on campus. I said, okay, great. We go to this giant colonial mansion. I mean, it was right out of Gone with the Wind. It was huge. The yard was filled with like 40 guys that looked like they were all football players, and everybody's got a red Solo cup and drinking. And we kind of, and you know, we're dressed like New York actors and Hollywood actors. We're not dressed like campus students, you know, in Oregon. And so me and Doughton and maybe Tommy Holtz, I think, we just walked through the crowd and started upstairs with the girls to go up to where this huge disco was on the top floor. It had a billboard of a New York skyline. It was one of the most amazing places. It was their disco, and it was like, wow. I mean, who could afford this kind of stuff? This was like one of the most glamorous places I've ever seen. And it's filled with guys getting drunk, and there's ladies in there. And after about 5 minutes, Doughton comes back to me and he says, Tim, there's some trouble. I talked to the president and they don't want us here. They said, we got to get out of here. And I said, well, relax. I'm Otter. You know, I said, relax, man. I'll talk to the guy. Let me talk to the guy. Let's see what's going on. So here come these guys coming over, and they're all drunk. And I just say, hey, I'm Tim. And, you know, he said, you got to get out of here. And I said, listen, I'm so sorry. The ladies invited us, and that's why we're here. And he said, that nobody invites anybody to our parties but the SAE members. And those girls can't invite you. And so you got to get out of here. And I said, no disrespect intended. I'm so sorry we've insulted you. We'll get out right now. Don't worry about it. I was trying to calm everybody down. So I said, come on. And I gathered our crew, and I just wanted to make sure everybody got out safely because it was getting kind of edgy. And there maybe a shove or two was being had. And I said, it's okay. We're going to leave. I'm sorry. And I realized then only half of us had gotten in. The other half were nowhere to be seen. You know, Peter Riegert and Jamie and Karen Allen and Bruce McGill. So down the stairs we go. I get out on the front porch. I make sure all our people are getting out. The front yard is filled with more members than I'd ever seen. And it's getting they're yelling at Bruce and Jamie and Karen out on the sidewalk where they've been kept. And I got my group out, and now I'm on the front porch. Well, somebody said something very rude to Jamie Widows, and he knocked a cup of beer out of somebody's hand, and it sailed across the yard and splashed against the wall of the porch that I was standing on. And about 5 guys turned on me and started towards me. And then it's like they were the linebackers from the football team. I'm a dead man. And I start backing up into the corner, and these guys start swinging at me, and I'm all alone up here, and I'm dead. And all of a sudden, some angels, this guy was like 6'5", 260, not drunk, and he stands in front of me, puts his arms out, and he and I are pinned back in the corner, and he's going, guys, just let him go, relax, just calm down. And they're swinging over his shoulder, and I'm ducked, getting hit in the head because I'm an actor. Don't hit me in the face. And he finally, he calms him down a little bit, and he says, "You got to get out of here." And I said, "Okay, go right." And I sneak under his arm, and I walk down the steps. And Bruce McGill heroically had come back all the way across the yard to meet me because he wanted to see if I was okay. And I meet him in the middle of this mayhem, and I said, "Bruce, whatever we do, we can't run, because if we run, they'll chase us and chaos will ensue, And bang, we both get knocked to the ground. And we look at each other on the ground and said, "Let's run." We took off. Everybody took off. We ran for 2 blocks before we lost the last SAE guy who was chasing us. And Jamie Widows had a chipped tooth. Bruce McGill had a black eye. I had knocks on my head. So did Riegert. And But that was our college experience, and that was our entree into fraternity life. That was the last fraternity party I've ever been to.
Where was Belushi?
Belushi was doing Saturday Night Live.
Okay.
What would happen? John was only there with us Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, maybe, and so midday Wednesday or Wednesday afternoon he'd go to probably Eugene Airport, then go to Portland, and then back to New York. He'd get to New York Thursday morning, took the overnight. He'd be in SNL Thursday, Friday, Saturday Night Live, back on a plane Sunday. And because it was live in New York at 11:30 at night, so they finished at 1 a.m., then they'd party till 4 or 5, and then he had probably a 7 a.m. flight. So Belushi would sleep on the plane, and then on occasion, Bruce McGill and I would pick him up at the airport, at the Eugene Airport, and then drive him back to the house he and his wife Judy had, just to make sure safely he's back with her. We'd, maybe have a drink, and then we'd head back to work because they had to work early on Monday morning. It was a wild adventure, but the SAE house just kicked our ass.
Yeah. So I always think about sliding doors. Things go one way, things go another way. One time I was up for the show Talk Soup, and it came down to me and another guy. And I always wonder, what would my life have been like if I had become the host of Talk Soup? You came very close to being Indiana Jones. In fact, at some point, George Lucas told you had the best audition of anybody that came in for the role. Do you ever think, God, what if I had gotten that part? How would life be different?
As an actor, we were talking about that toughness, and Sue was talking about that, that toughness you have as a performer or a comedian, I knew I was too young for the part, and I auditioned with Karen Allen. I tested with Karen Allen, and I had a great way of playing it, and the audition went really well. But when I went into makeup, I said, whatever you can do to age me up, because I kind of have a baby face, and probably at that time I was 28, 29, maybe turning 30, so I was in that age. Indy should probably be 35, 37, and he's got some miles on him. And so, they kind of stippled me up till they have a little gruff scruff and maybe some lines, and I basically did what Henry Fonda once told me. He said, acting, he says, you walk in the room, you hit your mark, you look them in the eye, and you tell them the truth. And that's what I did, and I did the test. A couple of days later, I get a call from my agent and said, you did a great test, but they're going another way, and I said, okay. And you sort of move on. And everybody knew how great that movie was going to be with Stephen and, George. But the agent said, but George would love to sit down with you. He wants you to stop by his office because he just wants to chat with you. And I said, okay, and I had to go in the next day and meet with him. And he couldn't have been nicer. And he said, we are going another way on this. I just want you to know that you did the best test. It was so good. It was very good. And I'm sorry, but you're just too young for this part. And I just said, George, and I said, oh, don't worry, George, we'll work together sometime. I'm still waiting for that time. But it was, the sting of it is one thing, but you just let go, because you go through that so many times. And it's like Sue says, if you have a good night, you have a bad night, it's about the same. You don't get too high and you don't get too low. If it's bad, you don't get too low, and if it's good, you don't get too high, because you're just setting yourself up for trouble later on. So you learn, you take your swing, and what happens happens.
Well, that was really a class act on Lucas's part, because I don't think that really happens very often, where
Never.
Someone would call you in when you didn't get the part to tell you why you didn't get the part. So many times in your audition, I may say to my agent, well, what's the feedback? They're like, they just weren't giving any feedback or whatever,
Going another way. Yeah, thank you, though. You did a great job, and it's like,
Yeah.
It's very, very nice of him, and I've never forgotten that.
So you worked with Aaron Sorkin, who is like one of the great writers of, I would say, our lifetime.
Absolutely.
His dialogue is brilliant. What's it like working with those words? And then how tough is it to do an Aaron Sorkin walk and talk? Because you had to do that a lot as Vice President 𝐕𝐻𝐻𝐻.
He writes such good dialogue that exactly who the character is. It fills you with backstory. It fills you with so much depth and so much complexity that it really, he gives you so much as a character. Like he told me on the first day and we never got the scripts in advance. We'd get them at the read-through table. They'd hand them out. At lunch, I think, during when the other actors were shooting, and I hadn't even been on the set yet. So I came to that first reading. He goes, "Oh, Jim, I just want you to know your first scene's going to be in French." And I went, yeah. I thought he was kidding. I said, "Yeah, right, Aaron, thanks." And he goes, No, I mean it. 𝐕𝐻𝐻𝐻𝐻 is speaking French in the first scene. He's talking to French reporters, and he's kind of showboating and showing this, that he should be president. And he's speaking to them in French, and he's just showing off. And I said, okay, great, but that's Aaron, he just constantly is raising the bar of the material and the, but you had to be word perfect because he was a theater writer, and he's one of the few writers where you really should say the words exactly as they are written. I mean, I used to call him the Bard of Burbank because he was that good. One time the script supervisor corrected me and said, "It's a semicolon, not a period."
Wow.
I said, "Okay,
that's detail."
yeah. And the walk and talks, what helped me with that was I'm a movie buff, and as I grew up watching the $1 Million Movie, and Howard Hawks was one of my favorite directors, and Howard Hawks did Bringing a Baby and His Girl Friday, with Cary Grant and Rosalind Russell in a newspaper office, and it's fast and it's great, and the dialogue is quick, and Howard Hawks' basic direction to most actors was, that's great, do it again twice as fast. And because they were smart people, thinking fast, talking fast, and they were in the midst of a hurly-burly world. And that was the White House. And I sort of treated it as a Howard Hawks kind of movie. And if you recall, when Allison Janney and Timothy Busfield had their they had a connection, they covered it up because they didn't want it to be public, or they were flirting with each other. That was really Howard Hawks, I mean, it was real banter back and forth. But that was the key for me to play those scenes, was these are smart people, they're thinking fast, they're talking fast, and they're in a hurry because they're saving the world. And so you had to know the dialogue and be prepared to do it that quickly. So it took a lot of preparation on my part, and I loved it, and it scared the hell out of me at the same time.
So you've kind of chalked up a very prolific directing career, and I wanted to know what inspired you to do that, and who are the directors that you looked at and said, "Wow, I want to take from them. These are the guys that really have, whatever, you know what I mean?"
I was always interested in directing. As a kid, I was shooting movies. I made movies with my friends in high school, shot 8mm movies. And then acting sort of took me down a path, When I was under contract at Universal, I conned them into giving me an editing room, and I'd shot my film on 16mm, and I would edit there and make 16mm movies. But and I always was talking to directors and asking them, advice about this and that and how they did it. I think one time I was in a show. I don't quite recall which one it was, but I thought it was probably an episode of when I was under contract at Universal. And I thought, wow, I nailed this character. It was emotional. It was one of the best performances I've ever given. And I saw the show, and it looked okay. It was okay. And I realized, wow, I thought it was better than that, and I didn't know what had happened. And then I did another show where I was good in scenes and not so good in certain scenes, and I didn't know if I nailed it, if I got it as good. And then I saw the show. I looked great. It just was wow. I just and I realized that's the director. He had the camera in the right place at the right time, the right angle, he cut it well. And I realized the power of the director to create a great performance. So that inspired me, I think, to go and to want to be of service to actors that I could work with, to put the camera in the right place and to help them if they needed help. Sometimes you don't have to say anything, sometimes you have to barter with them to get it, but it's like a coach in a football game, he says, when you get down to the 20-yard line, if you just button hook, they'll hit you, you'll be open. So that's what inspired me. And then I did a movie. I bought the rights to a Japanese series of movies, the most successful series of films ever made in Japan, called 𝐓𝐲𝐻𝐸, which was the blind samurai swordsman. It was a great character, wonderful movies, and I wanted to make an American version. And going through the studio process, we went through this director and that director, and this happened and that happened, and we finally got a director, Phil Noyce, who's a wonderful director. But then he would not look at the Japanese movies. He would not. I said, if we just make the movies just like the Japanese did, they'll be fine. No, I don't know. He didn't want to do that. And he was learning his craft, and it was not a very good movie, and is not as good as it should have been. And that's when I said, okay, you know what? I'll just do it myself, because I could have done a better job than this, because all I would have done was emulate what the Japanese did. And because that's what George Lucas did,
Yeah.
I mean, Hidden Fortress is inspired Star Wars, and George would look at look at World War II movies with dogfights in the air between the American and the Japanese Air Force, and that was what he modeled his starfighters fights with. I mean, he modeled his scenes after the old war movies. So you get inspired by other directors. So I figured that the worst I can do is just as make as bad a movie as Blind Fury turned out to be. I could have done better. So that's when I decided, okay, I'm going to take this on myself.
So last thing for you. I love at the end of the book, you have your films everyone should see. And so many of my favorite movies made. You're obviously Chinatown is one that is on your list and is my all-time favorite movie. The Godfather's on and on. What's it take to make your list? Like what makes a great, like I could make a case that Animal House should be on that list because it captured a time. It captured a moment. And of course I went on to be Sigma Phi Epsilon, and my experience was heavily influenced by what went on at the Delta House. What does it take to make your list?
I had to keep, adding to the list. I said, old classic foreign films, modern foreign films, and
yes,
old American films, and modern. I mean, Steven Spielberg, Quentin Tarantino, Steven Soderbergh, and there were people I left out, but Judd Apatow. I mean, there's so many. I just think the originality of voice of a director, writer, and the finesse with actors is the thing that attracts me. But I think of Billy Wilder and all the different kinds of movies he made, and that's what I admire. From Some Like It Hot to Double Indemnity to Witness for the Prosecution. I mean, really? I mean, Sunset Boulevard. I mean, come on. And it's like, and Steven Spielberg has that courage to try different genres and different types of movies. I mean, 1941, for better or for worse, is his mad world. And he said, I want to try and make that kind of movie. It works or it doesn't work, but Steven was never afraid to try different things, and I think just that courage that attracts me. But I look at the classics like John Huston and George Cukor and Victor Fleming. Victor Fleming, nobody remembers him. He directed Gone with the Wind and The Wizard of Oz in the same year.
Wow.
I mean, it's like there are those people, and they came through the studio system, and so many of them, and too many I know I'm leaving a handful out, but I just find anything. And then Kubrick, when I first saw Dr. Strangelove, I didn't know what, I was amazed. I'm sitting here just like, what just happened? This is crazy. He blew up the world. He ended the world. I was talking with Elvis Mitchell the other day, and he said, what was it like? He didn't see it in the theater like I did, and I saw it when it was first released. And he said, and I said, well, it's a black comedy. And he goes, but it's a sad ending. It's horrifying ending. He blows up the world. And I said, yeah, but he ends it with a joke of, Slim Pickens riding an atomic bomb down to a target. And then there's somebody singing, "We'll meet again someday," and it's a comedy. People are laughing. So how do you do that? That's the brilliance of Stanley Kubrick. I mean, and all the different movies he made. So yeah, it's that kind of thing that just startles me. If they startle me, I love them.
Well, listen, this has been absolutely terrific. The book is called Damn Glad to Meet You. It is available everywhere. It's a really fun read. Amazing career, man. Thank you for sharing a little bit with us today, Tim.
Steve, thank you. And Sue, thank you. Thank you for having me on. And I gratefully enjoyed our conversation.
There you go. There's Tim Matheson. Damn glad to meet you, as Otter used to say at the Delta House. That movie, by the way, I mentioned to him. I mean, it shaped my fraternity experience. It told me what, I mean, good, bad, or it told me how I was supposed to behave in a fraternity, which was very wildly, which I enjoyed, Sue.
Well, the movie was incredible, but it made me think I never want to be in a sorority.
Oh, really? Yeah.
I mean, the college that I went to didn't have one, but I wasn't a sorority person. That definitely would not have worked.
One other story that came out of this, I told Tim off the air after we were done, but when I was a little kid, we mentioned Billy Mooney, Lost in Space. So when I was a little kid, maybe six years old, I used to watch Lost in Space after school every day. He played Will Robinson. So I decided in my little kid head, first grade or whatever I was, I would write a letter to Will Robinson and then give it to my mom to mail it to him. And of course, he is somewhere in outer space. But in my mind, he had a post office box apparently somewhere out there. And my mom saved the letter. She still has the letter. I got to go back and I haven't read it in a long time, but I'd love to go back and read it and see what I said to Will Robinson back then. Maybe I said something like, boy, that you got to stay away from that Dr. Smith. He's a little creepy. Sue, this has been fun as always. Nice to get back and doing shows again. We took a little brief hiatus there and fun to be back. It is great seeing you. Thank you very much for watching. Thank you very much for listening. And we will see you next time on the Culture Pop Podcast.